Valerie, I'm super excited that you're here. Like, how's the weather been in Chicago? And can you guys like keep that weather? Because by the time Mother Nature gets over here to upstate New York, she's pissed off.
I know, right? I mean, it's not great today. So we'll try and keep it. Try and keep it. But it's kind of rainy today, gloomy. But it wasn't bad. Was it last week? Last week it was nice, and it's been kind of bipolar where it'll go up and down. And it was like in the 90s 2 weeks ago, and then it went down into like the 50s or 40s. But I was in Texas for a while beforehand, so
Ooh.
I kind of like the falls. Like I missed the fall when I was in the South, so it's
Yeah.
nice. I don't mind it. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine until you walk outside in your flip flops without any socks on, and it's 38 degrees out because you didn't bother to look before you walked outside.
Yes, yes. I know. I remember in college, I would like walking around on the ice and stuff. And then when you fall, you're like, no one saw that, right? Like,
I remember upstate New York, and I got to a point where it was just ice. And I would walk
oh, yeah.
across the street to get a coffee and walk back across. And this one time I slipped and fell, and I didn't spill my coffee. And I was like, yes, like I fell, hurt myself, but
Good.
coffee is here
Oh,
intact. We're good. It was like a new achievement, you know?
yeah. Yes, the coffee is okay. So,
Yeah, you learn how to walk on ice. We'll be fine.
yes. What was it last year? I had wipes in the car. And it was when it was like super cold after December or Christmas time.
Mhm.
And they froze in the
Oh.
car. Like it was a block of ice with the wipes. This is the worst.
Hopefully you didn't need them in that moment.
No, I did not. That's good. Yes, that would have been quite a situation.
Nice. So you're a mom, right? With the wipes.
Yes.
How many
I,
kids do you have?
I have three kids. So I have a 7.5-year-old, and she's very clear about me putting the half in there, and a 5-year-old, as well as a 3-year-old,
So you're
and a
busy.
girl, boy, girl. Yes, I am. Yep. I like to say like we have a girl sandwich. Like we have a girl and a boy and a girl. So
Oh,
they're
yeah.
fun. I love them. Like they are just, I mean, as moms, like we
Mhm.
love our kids, we do, but sometimes it's chaotic, and
Yeah.
I like to keep it real with like other moms, and in the moment, every day, every hour, sometimes
Yeah.
it's different. Like sometimes it's pure joy, sometimes it's pure chaos, sometimes it's just a little bit in between. So I just like to roll with it and live in the present as much as I can, but that takes practice, and some days are better than others for me. And
Yeah.
if I'm yelling at them because we're late, and like throwing them out of the car into school, being like, "You're late, the bell's gonna ring," it's just I try to then be like, okay, how can I live in the moment? Someday I'm gonna miss this, and so maybe the next day, just it's okay for late. Like it'll be fine, and just live in the moment as much as we can. And the times that I am yelling at them for whatever it is, because we all do, we're not
Yeah.
perfect, then I just say, mom's working on this. And just like you're working on things, mom's working on things too. So I like to say I'm an imperfect mom who loves.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. It's comforting to hear you say that if something happens or you yell that you are open with them, right? Like you're telling them, "Hey, I'm working on this too." I don't know.
Hmm.
I like that because I've oftentimes caught myself in a moment of like I'm either really tired and that's adding to like my short temper where I snap and I feel bad because I'm like, "Ugh, that's not how I meant it." But in that moment, I just lost my patience. And
Hmm.
I fully own up to it because I thought
Yeah.
it better for him to see that I'm able to recognize when I've done something wrong versus pretend like, I never do.
Like
Absolutely.
the day that I made you pay him a quarter and you used
Oh,
the naughty
yeah,
word.
but I still don't know what I said. I did say a naughty word. I don't think it was a swear. I think it was like something else. Or was it a swear? Do you remember what I said?
It was a
Oh,
swear.
shit.
And so I got Nugget on the phone, and I'm like, you need to ask your mom for a quarter.
Yeah.
And he did. He
Yeah,
was
he heard
awesome.
me. He was like,
That's
"Oh,
great.
mommy, you owe me a quarter or something." I was like, "Oh, shit." Yeah. But he was sweet because he gave
Yeah.
me the quarter to give to him. He's like, here you go, Mom. Now just give it
Oh,
back.
that's sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kids.
I know. And they're so like, especially I would say my 7.5-year-old, she's always been a talker and she's so verbose about everything. And she will say it like it is to me. Like if I am yelling, she'll be like, Mom, you are yelling too much. You have an angry face and I don't like it. You said you were going to work on it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we're all working on things, but
That's always nice to be like humbled by your child.
I
Knocked down a
know.
peg. Oh
Yes.
man. So,
Yeah.
besides being a mom, what else keeps you busy these days?
Gosh, I feel like being a mom, that's constant. There's always something with them. But I also feel like it's important as moms to have time for ourselves and what fills our cup up. Because I was talking with a therapist recently, and she had mentioned that, like, if our cup is depleted, it's hard to give to others. Like, when our cup is overflowing, that's when we can give to other people and to our family and to our kids. So for me, I have become very passionate about writing for moms, having a podcast. I have a podcast called To Mom with Valerie Probstfeld, NP, and my website, tomomisToLove.com. That has been kind of like my fourth child in a way. I have always wanted to be different as a mom. I studied for motherhood, since I was a child, like it was an examination, and I wanted to be perfect. I wanted an A+ on the motherhood exam. And so, when my mom would yell or when she would do things, like I would think in my head, I'm not going to do it this way. Like I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be a different mom. And then, I'm a nurse practitioner. So I, studied for pediatrics. I did a lot of child development classes. I knew in my head what I was going to do differently. But then once I became a mom, within 10 minutes, she was taken away to the NICU, and my illusion of control, all of that studying I did, all of that just went away, because it was like, I did not prepare for this. I didn't study for this. What am I supposed to do with this? And it took me a long time to address like those control issues. And, we've had some procedures that we had to do in the NICU, and it was so hard mentally for me to let go. And as a nurse practitioner, I saw things so much from the provider side. Like I knew mentally, like, sometimes too much, where it's like, I know all these things that could go wrong. But I don't know what it's like to be on the patient side, to be on the family side. And I just saw this like opportunity for moms need more support. We need more help in stressful situations or in just everyday life. Like I isolated myself so much that first year, I don't know, like in our thoughts and in our hormones and all of that. And I just became so passionate about all of this that it's like, I'm not perfect, like I was saying earlier, but how can that doesn't mean I failed. Like there's that growth mindset of like, it's just, I keep learning, everyone keeps learning, and we need community with us to support. So I try to get moms together, give them resources. I really want to try to promote some more like patient family advocacy in the hospitals, just to really get the word out of, hospitals and pediatric hospitals. They do such a great job taking care of kids, and I'm so appreciative of it. But a lot of times they don't really talk about the mom part, and that's such an important part. Like we're called by mom. We're not we're not necessarily called by our name. Like no one ever called me Valerie. They called me
Mom.
Mom.
Yeah.
Mom, do you need help with this? Or Mom, hold your baby down while we, give him a shot or something like that. And so you lose a bit of your identity. Yeah. And like as you're filling out that birth certificate, for your baby, you're also filling out one for yourself in a sense. And so how can we support ourselves? Like maybe, I always said like pet therapy would be great for for families, not just the patients. Like we need support. And so there, it is out there. It's just trying to find those resources. And yeah, so I mean, that was kind of a long thing of what I do.
A couple of things that you said immediately I can relate to, right? Like being a mom myself, I remember isolating as well. And it wasn't necessarily like I didn't have the medical trauma of it all other than labor trauma, like for myself, but I just remember kind of also not being prepared, right? Like there's so much that I also thought, if ever I'm a mom one day, this is how I will do these things, but not preparing for what it was like to actually give birth, how I felt about that moment, having no support. I didn't even know it was a thing that I could feel this trauma giving birth to my son. So immediately after that, boom, you're mom, right? Like you are the provider for this child. You are learning to adapt and just be whatever that person now needs, and you completely lose yourself. And I didn't really realize it until we got home. When we finally settled in our home in Georgia, I was taking a shower. This is like still the funniest thing ever. I was taking a shower, and one of the gifts that somebody had gotten us was Mommy and Me like body wash. And I broke down crying because I was like, oh my God, I can take care of myself. It was that thought that like somebody has provided something to me that I can use to care for myself. And I still use that fucking body wash today. I love that. It's a Vino lavender body wash for anybody out there.
Oh.
But it was just in that moment I realized I have neglected myself, and something as simple as like a mom's body wash was sweet and amazing and wonderful. And I think I'm still kind of, honestly, it's been 6 years, still learning to fill my own cup and not let it deplete all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You kind of make that adjustment from realizing that you were isolating yourself. You had just had this experience with this child. Now you're mom. Like, how did you kind of navigate back to realizing you needed to take care of yourself?
It was a process, I will say. And I think the first time I realized it was one of a nanny that we were working with. She would come like twice a week when, I think this is when I had my second was a baby. And so my older one was about 2.5-ish or so. And I don't know, I was just always nervous about everything. I was always like, just with all the NICU stuff, like I was scared of germs and I just didn't want to take her anywhere. And like I was saying earlier, she's so verbose, so talkative. And my nanny, she was like, you need to have her go out to playgrounds more. Like you need to get out there more, because like you can't just always be inside all the time. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. But like, so I kind of like took it in. I'm like, well, yeah, I'll go to playgrounds with her a little bit, but I still kind of isolated myself. Like always, I think I was always hyper vigilant, looking for something that could possibly go wrong. And I know, like looking back on it now with the knowledge that I have, I know I had a lot of anxiety and trauma, that I had to work through. And then like with my second, a little bit of OCD with that. But I went on a retreat. And this was when I was in Texas. And this retreat, I don't know like who thought of it, but it was a very intense 3-day retreat that like I don't know, it just like with all the things that we had to keep seeing specialists for a little bit, and she's fine now, but like we just were constantly going to doctor's visits and it was taking a toll on me. So my husband was like, why don't you do this retreat? Like a couple people have recommended it. And when I did it, it was very intense. It was like a mental health boot camp. Oh. And essentially it was, they held up a mirror to yourself, and that's what their goal was. And through that retreat, I think I really learned a lot about me. And for example, like one of the days, we were told to write on blocks, well, first we didn't know it was blocks. We were told to write on a piece of paper our negative self-talk. So like for me, like I have anxiety, I can get frustrated, I'm a perfectionist, control. And I think I listed like 15 things on the page at least, because they give us a minute. And I have so much negative self-talk.
Like, can I get 5 more minutes, please?
I know, yeah, I have more,
I'm
I
really
can put on
going
here.
in on this.
Yeah, so then she said, okay, take all of those words and here's a bunch of blocks, write them on every single block. So each block has one word. And so I'm like, oh gosh, I probably shouldn't have written that much. But then for an hour, they had us walk around the hotel with those blocks. And we looked ridiculous. There was about like 20 of us. And we're like walking around the spot. People were like opening up doors for us. It was insane. But at the time, I'm like, okay, maybe we're going to learn a lesson from this. So I remember I had already planned to meet my husband and my daughter at the time, and she was, a toddler. So she saw me. So it was like lunchtime. So like she saw me and she wanted me to pick her up, but I was carrying all these blocks.
Oh no.
And so I had to put them down in order to pick her up.
Right.
And at the time I'm like, okay, whatever, these blocks. But later on we had to reflect on exercise, and just something about that visualization like really clicked with me. And it was like, gosh, I really do need to put down mental blocks of this negativity that I have. I have so much negative self-talk. And I mean, the retreat was kind of showing me my negative self-talk is like going to eventually, that will impact my daughter one day, and all of this, like this generational legacy thing, which I'm so passionate about, because you don't even know sometimes you're infected by this like frustration and worry. And it's so contagious to other people. Sometimes you're not even aware of what you're doing. So that retreat very much opened my eyes, and it wasn't like an immediate change, but I would say that was probably the most impactful for me during those like early years of motherhood. And another exercise they had us do was they're like little beans that they handed out. And some people had like 3 beans. Some people didn't have any, but we didn't know the amount of the beans. And we were told to pick a partner and just keep saying over and over again, I need more medicine. The medicine was the beans. And you didn't know, like, for example, I didn't have any beans, but my partner had 3 of them. And so the only thing she could say to me was, I need more medicine. And I had to just say, I don't have any to give. And it was just such an interesting visual of sometimes we don't have that medicine. We don't have those beans. And like our kids, our family, work, whatever that may be, like that's why we have to like fill our cups up and get that medicine for ourselves again, get all of that again in order to give to other people. And I just thought that was a beautiful illustration that they did. So just, yeah. So
like that.
Another long answer. So.
No, this is great.
So I actually have a question for both of you, because you're both moms. Like, what do you do for self-love and self-care so that you can make sure that your cup is full when you're giving it out to other people?
I feel like this is the second time I've been stumped on a question like this, which, probably speaks volumes. It depends. I will be 100% admit I don't do it enough, and I don't realize my cup is empty until like I am incredibly exhausted. Like not so much physically, but mentally. Like I am drained. I am tapped out, burnt out, like I'm done. And then I'm like, oh, I messed up again, right? Like you're like, oh man, like how do I do that? But when I do find signs of it earlier on, it's gonna sound silly, but my favorite thing to do for my self-care is to literally just sit in a quiet room with like a cup of coffee or like my favorite tea and just hear silence. Like I just want it to be quiet in my reflecting time. So I'm getting better at it. What about you, Valerie?
Awesome. I would say my big thing, well, a couple of things that I've tried to work on is, like I was saying, that negative self-talk. I try to practice the habit of doing positive self-talk. So I may not feel like I have anything positive to say to myself, but I try to take a mental back road of that as opposed to that highway. So John Gottman, he's a marriage researcher, says you should give 5 positives to 1 negative for, marriages.
Mm-hmm.
And they've said that for like parenting and, other relationships. But I like to think about it like for myself. So if I have 1 negative, how can I give myself 5 positives? And I don't want to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
But I try to work on that. I try to like maybe even like write it in my calendar or do something. And that helps me like kind of get out of it, like my own head. But also I know nature for me is very like helpful. Like if I'm overwhelmed, it's helpful. Even like in the Chicago area, it can be so cold sometimes, but like if you dress enough layers,
Right.
like it's so important sometimes. And it's like that sunlight. And even if it's a cloudy day, like getting out there for me, I will sometimes try to find little shapes on nature walks and, little heart shapes that like the walnuts make. My daughter loves to look at those. So that helps fill my cup. And,
Yeah.
so yeah.
What about you, G-Rex? I think you like nature too, right? Like getting out and grounding.
Yeah. So the way that I ground myself as part of my self-love and self-care is, if the weather's okay, I'll go outside and I'll ground myself. I live on 8 forested acres, so I can go outside and, look out into the woods and smell the fresh air and just the crispness of the air. But the reason I ask about the self-love and self-care is this time last year, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't doing enough of that. And so by the time December rolled around, I had a massive mental breakdown. And I try and preach it on almost every episode that we have because I find it's so important that we remember to do that, right? That you're taking care of yourself, that you can find something to say to yourself that's about self-love, right? Because you're right, negative talk gets in your head, and sometimes it's really hard to get it back out. But, for me, part of my self-care, self-love is the podcast because I get so much joy out of it. And I love the stories and the way that people have dealt with their own crap in their life. And I get to learn. So part of my self-care and self-love is also learning. But nature is huge for me. But if it's too cold outside, I ain't going outside. That's the whole reason we work remote, right? If it's crappy outside, nobody's going outside.
So, Valerie, something you said earlier, I'm curious about. You had mentioned like before being a mom, you basically had like a blueprint, like this is how I'm going to do these things. What made you think that far in advance?
So that's something that I thought about a lot in childhood. So I will say, like I was saying before, that infection that my house growing up was infected, and it wasn't like with that virus or bacteria. It wasn't with anything like that. It was with frustration and yelling. And I feel like all I wanted growing up was for me to feel like I was good enough, and that I wanted to see smiles and not frowns, and I wanted to just I wanted to feel loved, I guess. And sometimes I think when we view ourselves or like our children as extensions of whatever we didn't accomplish, or kind of like something outside of who they are, it can get in their heads. And I think a lot of my life growing up was trying to please my parents, and kind of ascending this ladder that never ended. So I think that for me, it was very important to know, how would I do this differently? And not to say, like, my parents were doing the best that they could with the tools they had. I mean, no one's perfect. And that's the thing about generational legacy is like, it was just, I kind of saw it, I think, from a child perspective, more than more than I would have preferred to see. But I felt very empowered to do things differently because I know how it feels like to be yelled at all the time. Like, I know how that feels. And so when I notice me doing that, then I will try to work on those things. And that's all we can do. I mean, that's really all we can do in the moment, is to love. And I sometimes find that hard because I didn't have that example growing up. So I thought about, like, who was someone in my life that would smile? Because I was always searching for smiles. And my grandma, she smiled all the time to me. And I just loved going to visit her house. And she had these pink walls, and just everything about her house was love. Yeah. And she had one of those like rain fountain lamps that from the 70s.
Yeah.
Do y'all know what? Yeah.
Yep.
I loved that thing. I was young at the time, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And so I called her Rain Grandma. So she was Rain Grandma. And Rain Grandma, like, I was always good enough for her. And what I remember most was her smile. And Rain Grandma passed away in 2012 from dementia. And I remember, even with dementia, she still smiled. And so I try to smile at my kids, like, for Rain Grandma, like, and to honor her legacy. Yeah. So yeah, I think with my upbringing, that's something that I still work on. Like, I don't know all the answers as to how to be good enough, because I honestly don't know how to intrinsically say that. But again, it's that growth mindset. I may not be there right now, but that doesn't mean not yet. And I keep working on that. And I keep working on that not only for myself, but also for my children, because it's important to love yourself. Yeah. So I just really think that compassion piece is so important. And to kind of think of myself as an inner child and how I was. I remember really enjoying history. I still do. So I took out a value list one day and thought about, what values do I have? Like, what does my inner child like to do? When I play with my kids, when do I feel like I'm playing? And we talked about, like, nature a little bit. I like to do nature, but also traveling. And so, and that's not feasible all the time. But now that my kids are getting older, like, I decided, why don't we go travel places? Like, I love exercise. So I signed up last year for a half marathon in Sedona. So I was like, Sedona will make me train for it. It's like, let me do this. And so
that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it actually was amazing. Like, it's every February. I highly encourage it. It was great. Like, it was the best run I've ever had. And I don't really do half marathons much, but that was my second one. But anyway, I'm kind of going on a tangent with it, but it just kind of like having those values and really knowing what those are. And those are different for everyone. Like, we all have values, and we all have something that makes us sparkle inside. Yeah. And I think our inner child is the key to that. And I think my inner child for a long time was probably locked away because I was so, worried about pleasing others that I didn't know how to please myself. So yeah, now I'm kind of doing it now, and that's absolutely. That's awesome. And I think, with all the, for the longest time, this is something that I know it's different for everyone, but for the longest time, I was very hesitant to get my mental health addressed because it showed a sign of weakness. And this I love about your episode is you put that out into the open. And because it is so important, like, I feel like we all need to talk to someone. We all, like, it's okay not to be okay. And that's part of being human. It's part of living. And so it's just something that I, for years, didn't want to like go on medication or anything. People were like, well, you do have a little bit of OCD. Like, I can obsess about worst case scenario. So I remember a therapist I finally had seen recommended me to go on medication. I'm like, well, no, I don't want to do that. The side effects and the stigma, and oh my gosh. I finally went on it about 3 years later. It took me a long time too. But once I did, it was like, I don't know, like I have really bad eyesight. Kind of comparing it to that. Like, I didn't know when I was younger how to see clearly. Like, I didn't know that was normal or I didn't know what I was seeing was, like, I guess I don't want to use the word abnormal because no one is, but like, there's a different way of viewing the world. And I wasn't opened up to that for me until I started that medication. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is just, I feel like a different person. And again, I know that not everyone responds to medications that way. There's different medications out there, and maybe not even medication, like maybe it's therapy or whatever that is, but seeking that help and seeking that, that outside help, because whenever there's a thunderstorm, outside the community comes to help, like say there's damage from like a tornado or something, people help. But when you have an internal thunderstorm, it can be just as damaging. And seeking that outside help, we do need to do sometimes. And so I just really love advocating for that, whatever that may be for you.
Yeah, that's huge. That resonates, because same here, like, I think I'm only open about mental health and going to therapy now because of how rewarding it was. Sort of similar to what you just stated. Like, I knew I should, right? Like, I was like, yeah, I should probably talk to somebody about all this trauma that I've had in my childhood. But after doing it and finding a therapist, first of all, that it just clicked. We worked well together. Once I got to a point where I could get some closure and let go of that and realize that it wasn't something I had to keep carrying with me every day, I never would have thought the relief that I felt then was ever possible. Like, I was like, you mean I have been spending, years traumatized by this childhood, and I, in a year of being with a therapist, have been able to breathe. Like, it was like breathing again. Like, I've been holding my breath for 30 something years, and finally I could breathe a little bit clearer and happier. So, huge advocate for therapy.
Me too. 10 months in, and like, it's night and day, right? So like, the whole shitstorm started happening right around this time last year, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And for me, like, I just couldn't find my voice, right? I couldn't find my voice. I couldn't find my footing. Christmas Day rolls around. Like I said, 988, thank you for picking me up. Thank God my wife was home. Thank God, some higher power said it wasn't my turn. Because on this side of depression, I'm so much happier, right? So I'm going to tell you guys both something, because when you get into your 60s, like I am now, your inner child wants to come out a whole lot more than it did when I was in my 40s. So I find that, like, I get joy in things that I like doing as a kid, right? So I love to color. I love to, like, tinker around with things. I'm not mechanical by any means. My wife would tell you that for sure. But like, my inner child comes out a lot more now, and because I just don't care, right? I don't care like I used to. I care about my happiness and, just making the best out of, the years that I have left, and finding my passion. And I did. I found my passion with the podcast and, getting to do the things that I want to do. But I'm a huge advocate for therapy. Like you said, Valerie, we need to remove the stigma around that and really normalize how we talk about it, because it affects everybody. It affects moms, dads, kids. it can affect your pets. It affects everything. So, being open and honest and, seeking that help. Um, when I started to share my story on social media, people were reaching out, thank God for my friends because they propped me up when I couldn't prop myself up. But I had other people reach out and thank me for sharing my story because now they weren't so traumatized and terrified about their own what they were going through that they actually seeked help. So, like I said, I'm just super thankful, and yeah, let's just keep normalizing how we talk about it because it's really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really is. Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah. I appreciate what you guys are doing because this is it. Like talking about it, normalizing it, having community, having fun along the way. Like it's wonderful. Like not a character, but a person in history that I look to sometimes I find is so interesting is with Abraham Lincoln. He suffered a lot of mental health issues and had essentially like a very its childhood was his mom died of milk sickness, which was like part of the cattle had in I think it was in Illinois at the time. Anyway, he was young, and then other early deaths, and he said he's the most miserable man living. And there's many documents of that. And most historians agree that he did have major depression. But he still, I feel like, it's just a couple things like where he's just that enslaved with his thoughts. He was so like it just he really sometimes had those enslaved thoughts, but at the same time he kept moving forward. And he is such an important figure in history. And wonder obviously they didn't have the resources back then that they did, but just someone like that. I mean, everyone experiences that. Everyone experiences mental health issues. Like it's just it's part of living. And I also like to think of the brain because I love neuroscience. And there's like the emotional part of the brain and the logical part of the brain. And all animals have like that fight, flight, or freeze amygdala part. And that's so important for survival. But we have like this logical part that sometimes gets us into trouble because not all the time, like our fear isn't always necessarily true. Like it can be a tornado siren, like they may be testing the siren, or it be a real tornado. It sounds the same. It feels the same. Sometimes like it feels like I'm being torn up inside, like from an anxiety standpoint. And one's an entirely false alarm. And how many times like in our lives do we like kind of respond to that? But that is being human. And just saying like thinking of it, I think when I visualize it from my brain, I think it helps normalize it a little bit for me, where I'm like, okay, that's like a highway that I have from my emotional brain going to logical brain. So let me try and take a back road and maybe be more mindful in the moment or do whatever in the moment. Like exercising. And that's also a reason why I like to like do like the running and stuff, because I feel like it's baby steps, like maybe I'm going to do just a little bit today. But then I'll keep going and keep creating new pathways. And some days are easier than others. So,
right. Yeah. I have 3 questions. You don't have to answer them. We're going to start with this one.
Okay.
So far, your life in general doesn't have to just be motherhood, but your life in general. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned?
I think that perfection is overrated, is what I have learned.
Yeah, it's subjective as well. What's perfect to me is not perfect to my 6-year-old.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
What about you,
learning
Gina?
to let go.
What is the biggest lesson I've learned? Asking for help. It's okay to ask for help.
Yes. Okay, for you, Valerie, looking back on your life until today, is there anything that if you could go back and change, you would? And if so, why?
Hmm. Oh, I mean, my initial thought was maybe I would like do the whole medical school thing and do that. But I'm glad I took the path that I did. Um, and I don't know. I mean,
I'm the same with how,
yeah.
with like when I think about what I've gone through, right? There's definite negative things that like if I could not have taken this path, but in the end, it led me to where I am now. So
Absolutely.
it's hard to say, oh, I wouldn't have done that, but yeah.
For the longest time, I was upset that I moved to Texas. It was a random move to Texas. I was just like, oh, I'll just go to Texas. Like Austin sounds fun. So never would have done that. Like I was like young in my 20s and I was upset because like I just didn't know anyone. It was different than college. And I'm like, I was just lonely. And so for a while, I was like, oh, I wish I never did this. But it allowed me to grow. I mean, I needed that. I needed that difficult time. And I met my husband there. And so like life just, there's reasons for everything, even if it is like challenging times.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, G-Rex?
For me, if I could do it over again, I would have tried to open up sooner about how depressed I was. Because by the time it hit me, I was completely terrified. And I've been able to like let my wife know what was going on.
Yeah.
That if I could, if that would be like the only thing I would change. Because like you guys, you know what? There are times in my life that I needed to grow, and there's been some really crappy things that have happened. But I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't gone through all that other crap. So,
Yeah.
I'm pretty okay with my life.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Next question. What would you tell an earlier version of yourself?
That you're enough. That's what I would think.
I love that. What about you, G-Rex?
You got me stumped. So you give me a minute, and I'm going to answer that.
I feel like while you're thinking, I feel like, Valerie, you need shirts if you don't already have merch that says you are enough.
Oh,
I
that's
would
a good
wear
idea.
it.
Yeah, I would wear it.
I'd wear the shit out of it.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I know. I think I'm advertising some national park on my shirt right now. Yeah, Acadia.
Oh my God, I am
recently.
advertising Nantucket, not because I loved it, but it's because we were there and it was cold and I bought a sweater.
I'm advertising paint. So, okay, what would so for me, I would probably go to my 16-year-old self, and I would say to myself that just live life, live the adventure, right? Like don't worry about the past.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. I have one last question. Before I ask it to you, Rex, did you have any that you wanted to squeeze in?
No, I just really wanted to thank Valerie,
Yes.
for her perspective on motherhood, because there are so many moms out there that feel lost, right? That they don't feel like they have any community, and they don't know where to go. And your podcast and your website and like everything is so empowering to the moms out there. And I really thank you for doing that. Because as I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of that. And it's what's great about podcasts and the internet now, not the bad part of the internet, but the good part of the internet, is that we can share information, right? And it's in like bite-sized pieces of information that people can take, run with it, and feel empowered to, feel their feelings. So I can't thank you enough for what you do to the motherhood community. I am not a mom, unless you count the 8 cats, but both of you being moms, I applaud you. I really do. So
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
To tag on to that, I just want to thank you also for just being vulnerable. Like, I feel like you've been very vulnerable and like sharing with us. And I just want to thank you for that, because That's amazing.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. I appreciate that.
My last question for you is, what's next for you?
Well, so many things, but I say I have a book that I want to get published. So that would be next. To Mom is to Love is important to me because it's essentially the verb of a mom. So like our title is mom as a noun, but when we think of the verb, Merriam-Webster defines it as to give birth or to rise or care for or protect. And if you think about what does all those things, it's love.
Mm-hmm.
And so to live our verb. And so to get that book published is kind of the next big thing that I want to do, to empower moms and continue the podcast and continue just offering support any way I can. I just absolutely love and feel so passionate about what I do. And then just living in the moment with my kids because gosh, it goes so fast. It really does.
It does. So where can our listeners find you?
So you can check me out at my website, tomomis2love.com. And that will give you links to my podcast as well, which is available on Spotify, Apple, and Google. Mm-hmm. And I also have a blog where I write on there, and then I'll have any updates. And feel free to subscribe to I have a monthly newsletter as well as to my podcast.
It's okay to be not okay. Just make sure you're talking to someone.